In this video, I'm going to share 4 indoor photo projects you can do at home with not a lot of material, not a lot of expensive equipment, and you can do it right in your basement. Hey, it's Jay again. Welcome back to the channel. We are living in some crazy times, as we all know, given the coronavirus. And it has put a damper on all of our lifestyles, including mine. In this time, you'd love to get out and do some photography outside, do some social distancing, but the weather in the Northeast doesn't always cooperate. And so this week I've focused on doing some indoor photo projects. None of them are too expensive or too complicated. I'm going to share a bunch with you today. Hey, if you like these ideas and you like these videos that I do, make sure you do hit that subscribe button. So the first one I'm going to do is just capturing water droplets. Let's get started. I'll show you how I do it. So first, let me show you all the things you need. Again, none of this stuff is very fancy or very expensive. You know, you will need a camera. In this case, I'm using a Nikon D750. As far as a lens go, it is better if you have a macro lens. I do not have a macro lens. I'm using a 24-70, which means I had to crop it in quite a bit. You will also need a flash. This is a Nikon SB700. It's going to have to be off camera, so you will also need a way to trigger it. Next thing you'll need is a shallow bowl or plate to put the water in. You will also need some H2O to use. I brought it down a pitcher from the kitchen, worked pretty well. Next you'll need a dish towel or rag, and I'll show you why you'll need it in a second. You should also have a towel, because when you're using water, things do get wet. Unless you've got some fancy stand, you could just grab a simple pole like this. That'll do the trick. You're going to need some sort of object. In this case, I used a pen, but it could really be anything small. You're going to need some sort of white backdrop. This was an old backdrop that my kids had used for some project years ago, but it worked. To elevate the water, I just used these 2 chairs, which you see here. Lastly, you will need a tripod to hold your camera. It has to stay very still. You do not need a cup of coffee for this project, but who doesn't need a cup of coffee early in the morning? Okay, so first thing you need to do is take whatever dish you're using and put it in the middle of the table. So then you want to put some chairs on either side of the dish so you can hold up the rod that will allow the water to drip down into the bowl. I then put this rod between the chairs. It's elevated pretty nicely so you can drip water into the bowl down below. Okay, then taking the dish rag, I rolled it up, and I'm just going to tie it to this pole. Pretty straightforward, so it's hanging over the dish down below. Next step, take some water and you gotta fill up this bowl, and make sure you fill it up as close to the top as you can. Okay, after you fill up the dish, you want to also fill up the pitcher once again, and I'll show you why you need it in a second. So then we're going to put our camera on the tripod at just about the level of the water. Okay, then we're going to put our backdrop behind. It's not a very fancy backdrop, but we're going to put it behind the water dish. Okay, so to create the drips, we are going to use a very low-tech solution. I'm going to take my pitcher of water and essentially dunk the rag into the water. There are higher tech solutions, by the way. This is a real low tech one. When you let go, you're going to get some nice dripping in the water. And obviously that'll run out at some point, but then you'll have to do it again for other shots. So one issue you're going to have is focusing. The camera's going to have a lot of difficulty focusing on those water drops, given that it's all white, the drops keep moving, it's going to be challenging. So I got another low-tech solution for this problem. Essentially what we're going to do is put a pen or some sort of object in the water while it's dripping and allow the camera to focus on the object, in this case a pen, and that will provide a focal point, and then we just simply switch the focus to manual from automatic, and we lock it in. Okay, with the flash, I want to get it right beside the camera, so I'm shooting essentially right into where the splash is going to be. Now you will need to have something to trigger the flash, which is not going to be on your camera. In this case, I'm using a Nikon flash. It's an SB700, a little old, but it still works pretty well. And I'm fortunate in that my camera, and I'm using my old D750, if I have the camera on the flash that's popped up, it will trigger the off-camera flash. You might need a separate trigger for it. In this case, it works pretty seamlessly, so I'll just do that. With my flash, I also have to have it set to remote, so it will be triggered from the camera itself. So I've got my flash set to manual rather than TTL, so I can control the strength of the flash better. So I've got my shutter speed set to the fastest speed I can use that will sync with this flash, and with this one it's 1/250th of a second, but it is really that flash that is going to freeze the action of the water. Okay, to get some dripping going on, we need to get some water on that dish rag, move the pitcher, and we got some pretty good drips going on. So one piece of advice is to take a lot of shots. It is really hard to time these drops, and the more shots you get, the luckier you will be. So I got some good shots. One thing you can do to add some interest is to get some color on that backdrop. So I'm just going to tape a piece of orange construction paper on the backdrop, and you'll see what that does to the image. So the next project I want to share with you is creating some colorful abstract images using some very common household items that you would have around the house. Really fun stuff. Let me show you how I do it. So you won't need a lot for this project. The first thing you will need is, of course, a camera. I'm using my Nikon D750 and my 24-70 lens. Next thing you'll need is a glass dish or bowl. Make sure it's pretty clean, not too much writing on the bottom. You will need some sort of oil. This is just vegetable oil. I think you can use just about anything. It is necessary to have either an iPhone or an iPad. That will be your illumination source. Lastly, it's good to have some dish soap. I just took some from the kitchen, brought it down in this little cup. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to, on your iPad, get some sort of color gradient. So I'm literally just going to Google color gradient, hit search, You could do images. And then when you see one that you like, you see a ton of choices here. Just save that image right to your iPad. So I found two images I like, this one and this one. These will serve as great backdrops for this project. Okay, the setup here is actually pretty simple. Just elevate the glass dish using anything you can find. I found some old games that are in my basement. Put the iPad underneath. Now we're going to put some water in the dish. Okay, pour a little water in. You do not need a ton of water. Just want to cover that bottom of the pan, and that will do it. Next step, we're going to put a little oil in the water, and you want to put it kind of all over the place, and you're going to get some pretty cool patterns in the water. And once you got the oil in there, then just lean straight over and get some shots of the patterns with the colors behind it. And the iPad is going to provide the illumination. And you take a bunch of different shots, you pour some more oil in there, and you see what you get when you get them on the computer. Alright, so I took a quick look at what I had, got them up on the computer. Here's probably the best of the images. It's really a lot of fun. You just want to capture those colors and the patterns, and you're making art out of really simple household products. To mix things up a little bit, you can also add a little bit of the dish soap, and that will really break up those bubbles, creating much smaller bubbles. So those were pretty cool. That's a fun project. Probably the easiest one that I've got lined up to show you. Next one is using a mirror to do more product type shots, and you can use whatever products you have lying around the house. I'll show you how we do that one now. For this project, you really do not need a lot of stuff. The first thing you will need, as usual, is a camera. Once again, I'm using my Nikon D750 with my 24-70 lens. You'll need a mirror. This is an old crummy mirror. You can see it's broken. I found in my basement. You will also need a flash. Once again, I'm using my Nikon SB700. Okay, pretty simple setup here. I've got the mirror on a table. I put a black blanket up on a chair, not a very fancy stand, but this is literally all you need. Okay, the last thing I did, I set up my flash on a stand just off to the side, so shooting sideways, so it will illuminate what's on the mirror, but not really illuminate that backdrop, so that backdrop's going to look very black, and the objects will seem like they're kind of floating in air when you zoom in a little bit. So for this first shot, I just used a very mundane object, and that is a salt and pepper shaker. Okay, last project. What I want to do is take a picture of a wine glass with a reflection of that wine glass beneath it, with a very plain background. It'll look like this eventually. All right, let's do the setup. So like the other projects, you are not going to need a lot of equipment here. Let's start off with a camera. And so once again, I'll use my Nikon D750 for this shot. We will need a flash for this one. And so I'm using an off-camera flash. It's a Nikon SB700. We're going to use 2 wine glasses, and I'll show you why in a second. Please be careful with these wine glasses. You hate to break them. Lastly, you'll need some sort of diffuser or scrim that will provide a backdrop. Okay, I have cleared off the table. I set up the diffuser on one end of the table, and it's literally just leaning up against a chair. You'll see it in a second. And behind it, I've got the flash. I'm going to trigger it with my camera, the flash on top of this camera. Got to pop that up. Got to turn it on first. Pop that up. That will trigger the off-camera flash back there. Okay, to get that reflection, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm actually going to use 2 wine glasses. One here and one here. I've got to be really careful with these things. My wife would kill me if I broke a wine glass because I was taking pictures. Okay, so you're going to frame the shot kind of like this, right? You're going to include the glass on top, the whole thing, and just a piece of the glass on the bottom, so it looks like a reflection. And then, of course, I'm going to take the shot, and that flash is going to go off, and I'll get a nice, clean, white background, and I'll get some of the contours of the glass showing up in the image, too. So, got some good shots. I'll show you the final image now. So there you go. 4 indoor projects you can do at home. You don't need a lot of equipment. You don't need a studio. This is just my basement. And you get some pretty cool shots. Listen, I'm hoping all of you are staying safe and healthy and being careful so we can get through this virus. It is so disruptive, and I'm trying to make the best of it. I hope you are as well. If you like these videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. And until next time, stay healthy.